Salam sejahtera, ada bersama saya Rizal Zulkapli dan ini AWANI Global. Pada tahun ini Pertubuhan Bangsa Bersatu menyambut ulang tahun ke-75-nya. Dan juga tentunya pelbagai kritikan diberikan dan juga pelbagai pujian juga diberikan atas segala usaha agensi UN ataupun PBB dan juga agensi-agensinya seperti WHO, WFP, WTO dan pelbagai lagi agensi di bawah Pertubuhan Bangsa Bersatu. Namun kita ingin melihat kepada bagaimanakah Pertubuhan Bangsa Bersatu bekerja dan juga apakah kekangan yang dihadapi kini dan juga apakah kritikan ini adil untuk Pertubuhan Bangsa Bersatu. Untuk membincangkan perkara tersebut, kita bersama dengan yang berbahagia Tan Sri Razali Ismail, Acting President of the United Nations Association Malaysia UNAM dan juga former President of the UN General Assembly dan juga former Chairman of the UN Security Council. Tan Sri, thank you very much for joining us. Tan Sri, first of all, the UN turns 75 this year. Could you share with us your thoughts on that?
I don't have any prominent thoughts about. I don't believe in being adulatory unnecessarily. That he has survived 75 years, by most counts, is supposed to be good. But how have you survived? That's the question.
And you were a diplomat before you joined the UN. You were in many countries. Tell us about that change from bilateral diplomacy to multilateral diplomacy, especially in the UN setting. Was that a very challenging period for you?
Yeah, it's a long time ago. I mean, I was in the UN 20 years ago, 1988, 1998. It's 22 years ago now. And at that time, we were already going from bilateral considerations to multilateral considerations. From being a bilateralist to a globalist, it was beginning to take place. The problems of HIV/AIDS, for example, pollution, already even then were been seen as having to have a global solution. So it was the signs were there that we should be changing from being pure bilateralist to multilateralist.
But did the change happen as you expected it to be now that 25 years later? You were there during the 50th anniversary of the UN, and now it's at the 75th anniversary. Do you see the change happen?
I have not seen any change. We moved towards understanding a globalist culture, yes, but then suddenly we begin to emphasize our separate entity and our separate interests to the point that the globalist culture was forgotten.
Why do you think that happened?
Well, it has to do with economics. The movement of capital from one area to another affected a lot of people. If capitalist market is allowed to continue like that, a lot of people would be marginalized, and that impact happened. Very rich people became even more rich, even now under COVID times. So and then the idea of nationalism. People become more national. It's important that we must be Malaysian. It's important that we must be Filipinos. We must be whatever. And the emphasis on being different as a defense to what we cannot understand in global culture, globalist culture, it made the movement towards accepting multilateral commitments very difficult.
So you're saying that because of that, the UN was or still is unable to achieve its mandate to create multilateral peace, to create and enforce multilateral peace across the globe?
Obviously, the UN has not been able to do this, but it would have been too much to expect the UN to do it anyway. The UN is not an infrastructure independent of itself, independent of others. It is totally dependent on the support of the major powers, totally dependent on the IMF, and totally dependent on the developing countries. So if we don't have the combined support of all these parties, UN is not going to be successful. I mean, whatever would be the aspirations and earlier thoughts of the Secretary General, it's not going to happen.
Do you think that brand, the UN brand, has changed in terms of people's acceptance towards it, in terms of member countries' acceptance towards it? Do you think it has changed since the 90s?
No, no. What with unilateralists like Donald Trump insisting on the 100% rights of Americans to do what they want to do, I don't think we are on to a very good wicket where the UN would be constructively changing.
But what about other countries, other member states? The UN has now more than 190 member states. Are they powerless to go against this one particular force or power when it comes to dictating or when it comes to looking at how the UN can move forward?
I think in the time of COVID, it is not realistic to expect countries collectively to look to the UN. At best, they can only be some kind of regionalism. Regionalism in Asia, Southeast Asia, ASEAN, some parts of Africa, Europe. Europe exemplifies its regionalism. It has its standards. Perhaps it has been the most successful, the EU, that way. But whether all this can combine to make a cohesive, coherent UN with the right aspirations, I don't think so.
Why do you, when you mention regionalism, you speak with a little disdain there? Do you think regionalism is not a good thing moving forward, looking at how ASEAN, the EU, the Mercosur are doing?
I get the impression that most countries are for themselves. You look at the Shoku from the Philippines. Suddenly they are claiming again Sabah. How many years of investment, of goodwill, and building structures in ASEAN, that has not meant anything to the Foreign Secretary of the Philippines at this moment. He has decided to re-establish the claim. And I don't think one can look for any logic in this. So in the times of adversity like now, people are more prone to taking care of themselves.
And where is the UN in all of that? Where is the UN? What role do you think, do you envision the UN could play in all of these claims, or in all of these disputes around the world?
I was a supporter, quite an active supporter of Guterres before he became the Secretary General. I heard him speaking, I was there, I was representing the global moderates movement. We were in Kazakhstan, I think. And he spoke and he recanted and apologized for the excesses of the European countries, for many things that they didn't do or they did at that time. And I thought I would support this guy. But since he became Secretary General, whatever his early intentions, there's not much that one can say that Guterres has done. He looks to me as a very dour-faced, not very happy Secretary General, not being able to take into account all the things that are happening, swirling around him.
But you were part of that organization in the 90s. What happened in the UN in terms of the workings, in terms of achieving that vision, the dreams, as you mentioned, with regards to Guterres?
Well, don't overestimate what I said, what I was, and all that. I mean, I was just involved to some extent with some influence, and I happen to know Kofi Annan, and I was there working with the various personalities, Madeleine Albright, these people, and now the Foreign Minister of Russia, Lavrov. So we were part of that group that wanted to see things change, and then Clinton came into over the horizon, promising change. The developing countries felt good about that, but it didn't happen. America went back to being America, strong-willed and quite selfish. So we have not gone anywhere. But the dream has to be nurtured all the time. That there must be a time when the UN can really begin to do things. Nobody has put out the book how to do it, and at this moment there's no money, there's no political will, there's no moral courage, and there's quarrel between the big countries, between China and India, China and the United States, and Donald Trump is being a unilateralist.
You think it's becoming more challenging now, looking at the superpowers, the economic powers that these countries have these days, say for example China, India, and many other countries, part of that makes up the UN?
Surely, and that weakens the UN, because take into account the Uyghurs, the Muslims in China. There is nothing that anybody has been able to do about these people. Even the Human Rights Council has been quite ineffective. Nothing has happened in the Security Council. People continue to be kept incarcerated by the hundreds of thousands in China, and there is no explanation. So what do you say about that? What do you say about the Muslims, some of the Muslims in India, again, and the Palestinians? They are slowly becoming trivialized. They become less and less relevant to the scene in the Middle East.
Well, why do you think the UN is unable to do more than issue resolutions, do more than discuss about it, and why do you think the UN is unable to do that?
Well, the structures of the UN does not allow groups or the Secretary General to do things independently of the countries concerned, particularly the major countries. So as in the Security Council, you cannot pass anything without the major powers supporting it. Now that's not going to happen. So you are left with what it was like 20, 30 years ago, the same thing. So it must start with the willingness of these major powers to invest goodwill through the UN, to invest their commitment to human values, to proper rules of the game through the UN. So this has not happened.
Is there a hope for the veto system to be abolished?
No, none whatsoever.
None. No. Have you discussed this during your tenure at the UN?
I have discussed it in so many ways, backwards and forwards, and I could see that the rights of powers not wanting to give up whatever the rights they have continue to be fixed, and we're very adamant about it.
I'm going to give you some numbers before we take a short break. These numbers were provided by the UN, that the UN has provided food assistance to 86.7 million people in 83 countries in 2020. The UN has supplied vaccines to 50% of the world's children, helped save 3 million lives a year, assist and protect 82.5 million people fleeing war, famine and persecution, and among others, the UN has tackled the global, or is tackling the global water crisis affecting over 2.2 billion people worldwide. These, the numbers are some of the numbers provided by the UN. I'm going to play devil's advocate here and ask you, but these are happening despite what you said earlier. Tell us more about these achievements, and should we continue to criticize the UN because of the things that it cannot do, and forget about these achievements? Let's answer these questions after we come back from the short break.
Thank you.
Okay. Bertemu kembali, kita bersama dengan Tan Sri Razali Ismail, Acting President of the UN Association Malaysia, dan juga former President of the UN General Assembly and former Chairman of the UN Security Council. Tan Sri, you've provided us with insights into how the UN is working or is carrying out its task and mandate. I've provided the numbers for you. Despite the criticism that you've put forth, these are some of the achievements that the UN have achieved in 2020 alone. What do you have to say to that? I mean, there's the people criticizing the UN, but at the same time, UN and UN agencies have rolled out these programs for people across the globe.
Well, please don't get me wrong. That the UN has done all these things, those numbers, they are impressive. But there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that are still lacking food, do not have enough sanitation, proper health, so many things that are not being provided for people. How many millions are there refugees in camps that have nowhere to go, stateless people? So the human misery boggles. It is there, and it's unfortunate that everybody expects the UN to do something about this human lot. It's not going to happen. I think as much as we score well, and the UN agencies have done well, they are also limited by the funds that they don't have enough of, and the people they don't have to do these things.
Well, you mentioned the limited funds. Recently, President Trump pulled the US out of the WHO. The WHO has been very instrumental in ensuring that there is a global action to tackle the pandemic. Would this be a regular occurrence in the future if countries do not agree with the UN or UN agencies? They would just pull themselves out of the agencies and stop funds into these agencies? Do you think that is going to happen more regularly in the future?
I really hope not. I don't even believe that Donald Trump represents the main body of good Americans committing themselves to the UN. This is one man and one group of people trying to ride roughshod in doing things that he wants politically in the United States and outside to establish the fact that America is number one. It is totally wrong. I hope Trump will lose.
And the UN will be better if he
Much
loses?
better.
In what ways?
Then we don't have to deal with this kind of I would never have thought that there can be an American president that would think in terms of doing the things he has done, walked out of organization, threatened what is going on, do not cooperate on the nuclear cooperation with Iran, do all sorts of things, just to establish the credentials that America is powerful, America is number one.
Do you think he has created or contributed to the branding of the UN that we see today in terms of people distrusting the UN? Do you think he has contributed partly to that?
No. No, there are good Americans. I mean, I have had friends in the bureaucracy of America, I have friends in the capital world of congressmen and senators who are not like this, who can be critical, who are very strong in supporting their country, but would not be so negative about the UN. And this is not happen. This cannot happen any longer with what UN is doing, with what Trump is doing.
Do you think he is also a threat to globalization, internationalism? How can a country like Malaysia contribute to the other side of the discussion, promoting globalization, promoting internationalism, especially in a period where a lot of the countries are looking inwards to solve their own problems, their own COVID problems, their own economic problems? How can a country like Malaysia contribute to that discussion on a global level at the UN?
Well, one shouldn't get too ambitious. No? Now we are also having a lot of problems. I'm not even clear that our foreign policy is on the right trajectory. There are reasons to worry about that. But whatever Malaysia can do is rather limited. Malaysia can do things in the context of ASEAN. When ASEAN got torpedoed by the claim, the new claim of the Philippines. So there's so many things that we are undergoing at this moment. Primarily, whatever the adversity, whatever the pressure, we should be able to be moving towards accepting practices of sustainability and human rights principles. It is beginning to happen. There are people in Malaysia that are very willing to commit to that, sustainability and accepting human rights principles. But it's a long way because of our built-in structures, how our societies are and all that. But if we can do this, if we can teach the right things to our people in schools, if we can then manifest it in our bureaucracy, our civil service, that we believe in sustainability and human rights principles, then we can begin to be contributing to a greater understanding of how important human rights and sustainability are.
But do you think Malaysia is doing the right thing with regards to its foreign policy when it comes to sustainability and human rights? You mentioned that the foreign policy is not on the right trajectory. Should sustainability and human rights be a major part of the foreign policy for Malaysia?
You know, I'm treading on sensitive grounds, but I have not been encouraged by what's been happening on foreign policy. But at the same time, I would say that the foreign minister at this moment perhaps has the ability to help put foreign policy on an even keel. I think he has the wisdom and sense of dealing with people that can help. Basically, Malaysian foreign policy has suffered because he has not recognized, the political masters have not recognized enough professionalism within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have tried to get the professionals to do the bidding of the ministers. This is okay as long as the position of the professionals, how they think, is taken into account as much as how the ministers look in terms of what comes out from cabinet. But this has been out of balance for a long time. Most of the time, the foreign ministers have tried to push their own program. Foreign policy is nothing less, nothing more than national policy. The development of the country and the passage of foreign policy positions we take, they are completely intertwined. We have to understand that. It's not one prime minister coming in to change it, another prime minister, it's nothing like that sort, because it is there almost permanent. It has to be looked at in that context. And it is the professionals that know how to look at it. Believe you me, if you spend 10 years, 15 years looking at a particular issue, say South China Sea or whatever, now you know all the peculiarities about it. So please take into account what that person, he or she, has to say about it. You cannot have somebody coming out of cabinet to say this or that. Again, I don't want to be critical. I mean, it's not past repair. But you have to begin to understand how useful it is to depend on these people. The professionals have not been given their due in the last few years.
What are some of your hopes for the UN when it turns 100 in 25 years' time?
I think to be idealistic about it, but I think that's the only way to go. Is the UN must embrace the people more and more. Shy away from being involved only with governments, but to bring people. How do you open the doors to the UN to also delegations of people to come and say what they have to say? So we have to format it differently. So the General Assembly must have in its presence not just government, but also people's representatives. Of course, this is going to be chaotic. No question about it, it will be very chaotic. But it has to be attempted.
Should people continue to dream? Should people who are sent to the UN as permanent reps continue to dream and be able to dream to achieve something?
No, when I was permanent rep, I didn't think it was a dream that when the spring equinox, signaling the beginning of the end of the winter month, came, and I had to go and do a symbolic gesture, ringing the bell of a Buddhist project, Buddhist thing, and I did it, and I thought I was more a human being trying to articulate hope rather than going through the gesture as a representative of Malaysia.
Is that hope still alive?
Yeah, very much so. Although I'm not going to see the 100th anniversary of the UN, I think that hope must always be alive. People must have that hope. Because without the UN, we're back to what have we got?
On that note, we thank you very much, Tan Sri Razali Ismail, Acting President of the UN Association Malaysia and the former President of the UN 51st General Assembly, and also the former Chairman of the UN Security Council, for joining us today on AWANI Global. Thank you very much, Tan Sri. Itu tadi Tan Sri Razali Ismail. Teruskan bersama kami di Astro AWANI untuk perkembangan lanjut dalam dan juga luar negara. Saya Rizal Zulkapli. Salam hormat.